there's just still too much that's unclear about this. We're at a point in time in our society where an intelligence agency saying, trust me, is not enough. And that's certainly the case when it comes to signals intelligence and even with human intelligence. You know, seldom, intelligence is like a jigsaw puzzle. You have pieces, and seldom do you have a clear picture. And so much is open to interpretation. Either the Canadian government needs to put forward what they have in order to allow others to basically see whether they agree with the interpretation, or they need to stand down on their interpretations, on their accusations.
Mr. Gurski, since you've been a part of the establishment, first tell our viewers, is there any precedence for something like this, for a prime minister to go public with what at best right now are credible allegations?
You know, when you work in intelligence, you're always nervous when politicians take your information and go public with it. Information that's disclosed publicly can often lead to the loss of sources, be they human sources or signal sources, as Mr. Rubin just identified. There have been times in Canadian history where intelligence has been used publicly, but normally with the way the process works is that if you have intelligence suggesting criminal activity is possible, in Canada at least, that's turned over to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which is a police organization, which collects to an evidentiary standard, which intelligence is not in Canada. And you go forward with possible criminal charges. So these are very serious allegations. And as somebody who worked for more than 3 decades in intelligence, you're always quite nervous when politicians elect to release certain pieces of information, but not the whole story.
Would you say, as a follow-up, that this is an unfortunate politicization of what could have been and should have been an intelligence operation and may actually backfire?
It's really hard for me to say. I don't want to speak for Mr. Trudeau or for politicians, never having worked in that particular part of Canada. You know, could it have been done better? Probably. But they chose to act because they were afraid the information would be leaked anyhow, and they wanted to get ahead of the curve, I suppose.
Ordinarily, what would be the process? Since obviously India is not a hostile state, Canada and India are allies. What would have been the process if indeed there was intelligence of this nature and action needed to be taken?
I would assume, again, never having worked in politics or in foreign affairs, for example, that if we had information in this regard, we would have shared it on a bilateral level with India. Show them exactly what we have and have India respond to that. I don't know that that attempt was made or not made, but that would be the normal course of affairs as I understand the way the diplomacy works.
Michael Rubin, do you, as someone who's worked in American intelligence, think that right now America is in a bit of a bind, considering that now information emerges that the initial quote-unquote context of this information was given by the US as a part of Five Eyes intelligence sharing process, and then Canada developed on it?
Well, certainly that's what the New York Times is saying, that they weren't aware of the plot until after it happened, but they're giving some context. At the same time, it's the Canadian intelligence service, which supposedly is drawing the direct link, the smoking gun, and so forth. Again, the United States would be aghast if any of its sources and methods were shared as a result of this political brouhaha. But at the same time, I just need to caution, intelligence is never or is seldom as clean and as clear as many in the public imagine. And therefore, even if there were phone intercepts, for example, complaining about Nijar, and that was what some intelligence analysts say is context, that's not a smoking gun. That's certainly not to an evidentiary standard. It should be no surprise to anyone, however, that collection is going on with regard to some of these figures, even among allied states.
Can you throw more light on that, Phil Gurski? What exactly is the process of this entire intelligence sharing within the establishment?
Right. So there's two ways. As Mr. Rubin said, I mean, Canada and the United States have been part of the Five Eyes Alliance for many years now. It is the gold standard of intelligence sharing on the planet. We've been doing this for many, many decades. Very sensitive intelligence is shared. We cooperate and collaborate on an awful lot of files. But in Canada, as Mr. Rubin also alluded, we make a very clear distinction between intelligence and evidence. Intelligence is gathered at an earlier stage to indicate that something may or may not happen. We in Canada have mechanisms whereby intelligence can be shared with law enforcement, but not used in an investigation because it's not collected to an evidentiary standard. Law enforcement must collect to a higher standard to be used in a court, whether it's a criminal court or civil court, whatever. So there are well-established practices that have been going on for many, many years now, whereby an organization such as CSIS, where I work, can say to the RCMP, look, here's what we know about X, Y, or Z. And if the RCMP feels that there's possible criminal intent there, then they can create their own independent, not joint, independent parallel investigation into that person or persons to determine if criminal charges are warranted.
So what exactly is the difference between giving context for allegations and actually saying that these are credible allegations?
I have no idea. I'm sorry. It means nothing to me. As Mr. Rubin said, intelligence is really great. I mean, I spent more than 3 decades in it, but it's very seldom do you have the complete 100. I think what he used is an analogy of a jigsaw puzzle is great. The problem is that you have pieces. You have no idea how big the puzzle is, nor do you know which pieces you have. It could be pieces 1, 2, and 3, or pieces 1, 3,000, and 400,000. But so you're trying to collect more intelligence, more information to complete that puzzle, without always knowing what the puzzle is supposed to look like at the end of the day. So, again, to reiterate, you rarely have that complete picture that can go forward.
Most of the world right now is completely foxed by exactly what are these credible allegations and what does that even mean, exactly like you. But Michael Rubin, what do you make of President Joe Biden's position right now? Because if one is to believe that America was a part of this intelligence gathering against Indian officials, how does the U.S. explain its position to India?
Well, firstly, behind the scenes, I don't think that there's that much tension here between the United States and India. Make no mistake, the United States, in all likelihood, is collecting intelligence against India or on India every single day. But for that matter, India is collecting intelligence on the United States. This is something that intelligence agencies do. Friendly intelligence agencies then share. Hostile intelligence agencies are a different story, but we are not hostile intelligence agencies. So what we see, according to the New York Times, where material was presented after the fact, was it didn't raise to the concern or strike alarms inside the United States intelligence community. When Najjar was murdered, they said, oh, there's some information here. Maybe Canada wants to take a look at it. And that was the end of it. Now, what I would say is that the United States, the Biden administration, has been caught by surprise about this, as has much of the world. It's been very reactive. And given that Canada is an important ally, India is an important strategic ally, I think the United States' goal is going to simply be to tone down the volume on this, to try to get much of the investigation and much of the discussion out of the public eye as we move forward. At the very least, I would say that the biggest silver lining to what we will have is no longer will Americans, or frankly many in the West, not take khalistani separatism and terrorism seriously. It's now fully on our radar screen.
Would you say then, Michael Rubin, that America was also blindsided by the extrapolation of intelligence it shared in good faith by Canada to level those charges against India?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, certainly we were blindsided by the crisis, but the fact of the matter is a murder did happen. We don't know what happened there, but it wasn't the sharing of intelligence and a random extrapolation. There was a murder that occurred, and that's what caused the tempest in the teapot.